All righty, what's going on, Macro Perspective peeps? Marcos and I are back with an amazing guest today. I'm actually super stoked for this guest, Forrest Smith. First and foremost, Forrest is a dynamic entrepreneur. He's been an esteemed leader in the space for a long time, and today we're primarily going to be talking about Kineon and the Move Plus and different units and red light therapy. I do want to say, Forrest, we'll let you go deep into yourself and we'll talk, but this Kineon product here, the Move Plus, I got it because your marketing is so good. It's all over social media. I had to buy it. The beautiful thing was I used my HSA fund, didn't have to pay anything, got it, and it came in a timely manner. I was prepping for high rocks, half marathons, and my ankle and knees were having problems, and I felt it right away. The science, I'll let you go into it, but I was so in love with this product that I wanted to find a way to get it into our longevity clinics here at Synergenics. So Synergenics, I got and connect with Bex. And Bex was like, hey, here is the pharmaceutical route of working with our company and having it at your centers. And, there's a whole set of things that they were doing there. I'm not so sure if that partnership's panning out, but I was like, you know what? Maybe there's a way to get Forrest on the call and have him talk about red light therapy and bring some, education and value for the folks. I think they'd love it. I think this conversation is going to go deep dive in science. So for the folks that are listening, please have a notebook, notes app, maybe an AI app that can transcript, and that way we can go into it because I'm going to let it go. We're going to go deep in science because Marcos and I are about to nerd out right now. So, Forrest, thank you so much for being here. But you have a great dossier, but would you mind just probably going into yourself just a little bit, your history, and then also like how you got into the space and to now be at this forefront of Kineon?
Absolutely. I spent, I moved to China young. I studied Chinese and since I was, I think, 13 or so. So I spoke and read and wrote Chinese young. And I moved there to start building startups when I was about 20. Left Georgia Tech, where I was in school, and went over there. Actually, I started my first business, and we had built it to a certain point where I could actually, afford to kind of pay myself and grow the business more. So left tech early and went to China. Spent about 20 years there building startups and really trying to do things after you get your feet under you. The first kind of, I think, when you're young, your 20s is kind of going through things and trying to find what fits. And what really fit for me was trying to build companies that move the needle from a systemic standpoint. And so I mentioned to you guys offline earlier that my last company that we exited, that we started built from nothing up was a LED lighting and controls business that we exited to the second largest lighting company in the world with the mission to really kind of reduce the energy load that was necessary. And the idea that if you reduce energy load, then there's a lot you can do from a removing energy generation and then shifting energy generation to things that are going to be more kind of transformational versus kind of oil and gas. So, what I found coming out of my 20s and starting the businesses in my 30s was that, really I wanted to make a big impact. And it's nice to build a company and make money with it. But the what you leave behind you is the systemic impact that you make. And that's how we came to start Kineon, is really wanting to impact people's lives. And so we spent our first really 2 months before my partner and I really even talked about products, talking about what the mission was. And we wanted to be held accountable and have something that we could measure. And so what that came down to was, in the end, our mission is to increase the quality of life for the largest number of people we can in the most measurable and substantial way we can. And it's a direction as a mission that's really kind of driven all of our product. So even before the product, the technology choice. So where's the biggest gap in what's available at a lab level versus what people can use at their home? Where are things like kind of opioid addiction and NSAID kind of impacts on people's cardiovascular health? Where can we come in and offer something that's a technology that can move the needle for people from a health and wellness and recovery and quality of life standpoint? So that's how we came to start Kineon. We're a worldwide team. 40 people plus now, over 14 different time zones, and we've got our first product, which is essentially when we started building and designing products. The idea about this was that a laser device is a $30,000 to $50,000 device, and we really just wanted to challenge that and get it in more people's homes because there's a huge impact it can make in getting people away from pharmaceuticals. So that's kind of the main trajectory for how we started the company, and hopefully that wasn't too much of a long elevator ride with that, but. Yeah, it's an exciting company to be around, and we've shipped 45,000 devices, and we see on a daily basis, that sales revenue growing is really interesting. But the biggest thing for us is on a daily basis, we hear in from between 1 and 10 people whose lives are changing because of the technology and the time we've put into it, and that's really the driving factor for us.
Dang. So with your Move Plus unit, like again, like if you go to the website, it kind of has like particular areas that it may or may not work better with, right? I do see an area that of just full transparency. My dad's been dealing with this neck issue, but it's like not necessarily his neck, right? I see that there's a spot for neck, but getting into this particular spot where he's like having pain, do you think that there would be a benefit from it, even if it's not with one of those areas that is maybe specifically laid out on your website?
So we try to lay out as much as we can on the website, and we get a lot of questions about it because it's like, how can one technology treat all this different stuff? And I think one of the things that we try to do is educate and set expectations around it as effectively as possible. Mm-hmm. And the main thing that we impact from a mechanistic standpoint is inflammation. But inflammation causes so many downstream negative outcomes from a health standpoint that it's just crazy. And so when you talk to people about like, okay, well, yeah, we can treat your soft tissue, arthritis or osteoarthritis, but also we've had a lot of our users treating things like endometriosis. Like how is that not snake oil? Like how can you be treating all these crazy things? But again, what we're treating is not this specific pathology. We're increasing blood flow. There's a really powerful kind of impact on blood flow, and we can kind of dive into some of the mechanisms for that. But essentially, it's kind of parsing and removing the connection of nitric oxide and a couple of different flavors of nitric oxide. There's a whole kind of biochemistry piece about this from hemoglobin, which is really kind of everywhere in your body, and that's a dilation factor for your blood vessels. So you're delivering more blood. Hemoglobin is also a carrier molecule. So when you're removing something like nitric oxide, you're also able to bind things like oxygen back onto that same kind of hemoglobin. So you're delivering blood more effectively, you're delivering oxygen more effectively. But the main thing is you're reducing kind of different proteins that have been really thoroughly tested. So different cytokines that are present for chronic. So we try to kind of dive into this a little bit, but essentially with chronic inflammation, there's a different kind of subset of these protein markers that we track versus acute kind of inflammation in the area. And acute inflammation actually does some really powerful things relative to bringing in growth factors and a number of other things that help with healing. So we don't really want to trigger those kind of the reductions in those things that are helping the healing process. But with the more chronic ones, we have a huge impact on that. And so when you see things like neck pain, there's a number of different causes. And so I'm giving you a very roundabout way to answer your question. But we have seen from the literature and from our kind of anecdotal user input that things like herniated discs heal faster because when you reduce the inflammation around them, any tissue heals faster. And so there's a number of different things that are mechanistic for this. But yes, neck pain in around. Sorry, guys, give me 1 sec. I got a little one here with a problem. Sorry. All right. Sorry.
I have the same problem right behind me.
My dog was coming in, and I was like, what the heck? And like, I have a kettlebell there, and she got strong enough to like push it. So I was like, hey.
Give me 2 seconds. He split his toe open. I'm just going to wrap it up for something until his mother.
Do what you got to do. Do what you got to do.
He's been building a fireplace and split his toe on some logs here. So,
is he okay?
Yeah, he'll be right. His mother's home shortly, so nothing like a little mama love. Actually, with small cuts like this, our device is not kind of unusual in that fact. We deal with the internal tissue very effectively. A lot of devices deal with the kind of superficial tissue, but for regrowing tissue stuff like this, the kids, it's like their Wolverine device. So whenever they skin their knees or whatever, they got to put the lights on it. They love it. It heals like overnight.
What?
That's so cool.
Okay. So then you were saying, okay, so in a roundabout way, effectively the product is not attacking it from like a pain triggering thing, but more so about like kind of at the blood level with like the hemoglobin, stripping things off that would potentially be causing inflammation in a sense, but then like bringing in things that help with anti-inflammatory properties within like your natural production, more or less, right?
That's
Is that,
exactly right.
yeah, okay. Which makes sense. So it's like, okay, cool. So like the harder part might just be getting it to be able to like sit on that area with like straps or whatever, however you're going to go about doing that. At least like my interpretation of that's like, it might be in a weird spot where something that's like near a joint, it's easier with like the device to just kind of have it in that spot because of the circumference. But in this case, it's just maybe a little bit of, you know, a little bit of trial and error to figure out how to get it to sit there.
Yeah, one thing that we do with these is we also have an extender strap. So if it needs to go around your body to get onto your back, or like basically you just shorten between the modules, you shorten the straps there, and then you use a long strap to go around your body. And so the extender strap helps you kind of lower back, hips, kind of if you have something kind of thoracic spine and you want to kind of have it cross body or kind of draped over, the extender strap helps a lot with that.
Nice. Okay, cool. I see that like as part of the accessory package there. Yeah, I mean, so the endometriosis one's a curious one. Have you guys like, I'm sure you guys like give your product out to like do some sort of research. Are there things that you guys are looking at to have it not necessarily a cure, but things that can kind of help with alleviating symptoms related to particular disease states? Is that part of like your mission? I mean, you kind of mentioned that in the beginning, but is that stuff you're looking at?
No, you've nailed it. I think so. We're launching a couple more products this year that will be on our new platform, and our current platform is on deep red, 660 nanometer and 808 nanometer wavelengths, and that's near infrared and deep red. And at the time we launched it, were the two most, and are still the two most researched effective wavelengths. And we spend a lot of time. So the difference between with our product and kind of everything else that you see in the market is that modeling how. So most companies that are talking to you about what you're delivering is really just saying energy out of the system and energy into your system. And what we've found, and we found very early in the company, was modeling how photons distribute through tissue is a much more effective way to dose this. And so we tested things like, okay, how much energy is coming out of this and into this, but we're changing the number of emitters, the power per emitter, like changing a lot of the parameters. What are the kind of what they call the duty cycles? How long is it on? How long is it off? When you're pulsing it, what are the frequencies that it's at? That, you know, everything that's kind of within what they call the pulse width modulation characteristics, and then also the power levels and wavelengths, et cetera. So what we found with this is that the kind of standard models for like, oh, you want to put this many joules into your system, it's kind of, it gets you in the neighborhood, but you're not really kind of optimizing a dosing. And what drives the outcomes for anything with light therapy or photobiomodulation is optimizing the dosing. And so what we did is kind of turn that on its head and said, what photoacceptors in the tissue are we trying to trigger? What is that going to do from a signaling standpoint downstream? And at what level of volume do these photoacceptors exist in the tissue? And at what depth of tissue do they exist? And so we started kind of modeling that in Monte Carlo models, showing how photons distribute through. And then we said, okay, like what's the correct way to dose these to get the optimal outcomes, to trigger the kind of strongest responses to this. And we made some assumptions, and then we would go test these in reality with things like signals from serum nitric oxide. So you can use a number of different types of optical sensors for measuring like how much nitric oxide is in your blood. And then like, you know, we know that's one of the photoacceptors, that kind of hemoglobin binding site. And so we said, okay, this is one of the ones that we know, and we have a good way to measure it. We can go say, here's our model, here's reality. Why are we wrong? And so we've done probably 20 cycles of that, and just closed the gap over time to where we're modeling what's reality essentially at this point. It's kind of, there's still kind of a delta with it because there's always variables. The next step of this actually is building sensors into our technology, and that we'll be launching those next year, using broadband near-infrared spectroscopy, so we can dose everyone on their own individual basis, based on how you respond to this. But what we have to right now is essentially just the best dosing model in the world for being able to control the light characteristics in a way that's going to provide the best outcomes.
So you're
like right.
Go ahead, James.
Real
I'll
quick,
go
sorry,
next.
Mark. So like right now, like what's on the market is that Move Plus. Like that's what
Mm-hmm.
we've been using. We're talking about penetrating the joints, helping with recovery, all these things, but we'll also see some things like endometriosis. When you're talking about like depth penetration, I know that I was listening to in a different podcast, like a red light therapy podcast, and they were talking about like you want to gut health, for example.
Yeah.
It's been seen to help, but how can it penetrate that? So this is like kind of like what you're talking about, right? Like which tissues can be penetrated at what lasers and what depths and what dosing, and then also like how much time. Like for me, when I listened to that, I was trying to heal as fast as possible with like a rolled ankle and like a knee thing. That like the ankle rolled a little bit, but then it like started affecting the knee more than the ankle. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, putting it on, and I was like, well, how much red light am I supposed to do? I'm doing this all day when I'm on. And then you're like, it's probably not all day is best. It's
Yeah.
probably like a few times per day or something like that.
Yeah. So we suggest morning and evening because you do clear out a number of these different downstream signaling there's most of it's protein signaling and there's some gene expression changes that you see as well that we're starting to get into as well. But long story short, over a 12-hour period, you're going to see a lot of those kind of reset to a point where treating them again is going to actually provide you some level of benefit. So our devices are built so that really 15 minutes of dosing twice a day is going to get the optimal outcomes for you almost everywhere in your body. And so you can do more than that in some places like hips, where you have a lot of tissue. When you're treating things, and because of that, hips and kind of hip injuries and particularly soft tissue around the hips. So if you have people with kind of labrum tears and things like this, the recovery impacts for those are amazing. When you see things like hands, we would say 5 to 10 minutes is probably the maximum you can do out of that. And we also want to see people treating upstream a little bit because there's so little tissue there in the hands for osteoarthritis, as an example, that when we launched a program. When we launched the first product, we noticed that a lot of the people my partner and I put our cowlings out there because we wanted to know if people weren't getting the results they expected. And so I would say like 80% of the calls we were getting were like, this is not helping for my osteoarthritis of the hands. And you're like, okay. And so we dig back into it. And from that same kind of modeling standpoint, the light distribution and what it triggers, there's just not enough tissue there for us to kind of have the impact we want to. And so we have to do upstream kind of treatments with that, so that you're triggering other tissue that comes to interact with that. So essentially what they call remote photobiomodulation. And also you need to set expectations with people that if you're treating kind of osteoarthritis of the hands, as an example, this could take 5 or 6 weeks before you start to see those real kind of meaningful changes. Where if you have an acute injury of the ankle or knee or kind of soft tissue where you're seeing something swell up, like I have an old torn meniscus, and for some reason, overhead squats, just that pattern kind of triggers it to flare up quite a lot. And box jumps kind of makes sense. Like you're just pounding on it. But like the overhead squats, it used to be that I would be out for like swollen knee out for like 3 weeks. And I get that down to like 2 or 3 days now because there's the right level of tissue. There's a really optimal level of tissue and for us to treat essentially and reduce that inflammation and get back into training. So that's we try to be as upfront about what it can actually do. I think the thing that gets lost in all of this, though, is that if you're looking at other kind of pharmaceutical solutions, there's nothing that does anything except take the batteries out of the fire alarm. The fire is still burning in the kitchen. Your knee's still jacked up. Your ankle's still jacked up. It's not helping anything. That like non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs are kind of a misnomer, and there's some really powerful downstream negative impacts from a cardiopulmonary standpoint, including things like a 50% increase in severe cardiovascular disease if you're taking NSAIDs chronically. So when we compare it with what's the gold standard from a recovery path, I think, and the same thing with kind of ice or cryotherapy, the difference between that and what you see, we've got some great histology slides I can share with you guys that show you kind of like visibly what the difference is between ice therapy and photobiomodulation from a tissue recovery standpoint.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like, do you have those slides just like ready to go on deck right now?
Yeah.
All right, you want to share your screen
So
with people?
You can share it real quick.
Sorry. I know.
And just real quick, just for later in this conversation, the new products, are we allowed to say them? Because I feel like I got like a some slides about them for the future. Am I allowed to say the names of those or not
Yes,
yet?
yeah, please.
So you have the heal, which is the gut heal plus, which is the gut health. Then you got the calm plus, the vagus nerve, and I know you talked about the science there and how there's some new research around red light and vagus nerve, and then brain plus, which are like the three products that are going to be consumer but also like practitioner focused as well, right? Like that route.
That's exactly right. We're building out a healthcare. We actually, so for my business partner Tom and I both, this is our first direct to consumer business, and so we had to have really like 100 or 150 different healthcare professionals reach out and be like, hey, can we work with you guys, and does this make sense for us to kind of like for the light bulb to go on and be like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. You guys are like in this on the front lines every day, interacting with people where you can actually see this, and we actually have a number of, I think we've got 400 or 500 different healthcare professionals that we're working with as resellers right now who are using this specifically for different pathologies in clinic. And it's been I love it because we get kind of stuck back in the lab trying to like make all of these things where we're like, okay, how can we make it easier for people to use? How can we make it more effective? And when we have that feedback loop with healthcare professionals, it just shortens that kind of that adoption cycle for really good feedback on how to improve the product. And that's where our next products are coming out. And again, we're shifting from a two wavelength version to a 4 wavelength version. And that's adding in a couple of different things that allow better penetration with 1064 nanometer and 940 nanometer, both of which really didn't have a ton of research with behind them at the time we launched the first product, but have gained a lot more for internal tissue, like that gut biome and like the brain. And there's some really cool research groups, one out of Australia doing gut biome research on, your gut generates a ton of dopamine, and it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier, but these guys noticed that they were seeing really positive outcomes or positive benefits to patient outcomes for Parkinson's disease, which is a dopamine-based kind of disease in the brain, and just by treating the gut. So they weren't treating the brain at all. And then when you combine it with brain treatments, actually you see
that's a brain product by treating the gut. That's crazy.
I tell you what, though, one of the things that I've done is, and you guys have a device. I try it out and let me know what you think. If you treat your gut, one of the things that's been noted in the remote photobiomodulation kind of research is that they measure what they call affect, which is essentially like how you feel or your mood or your kind of like just general outlook on the day. And like there was a couple of papers on treating the gut and seeing a massive uplift in affect. And so I tried it, and I didn't notice anything for the first 10 days. But after 10 days to 2 weeks, you just see this great uplift. And so two things from that we've seen both from the literature and from the kind of anecdotal usage of the product is this affect, this mood lift, but also you don't get sick. So like your gut is just such a center of immune health that you just stop. The kids, I got two young boys, 9 and 5, and so they would just drag stuff in from school, and the whole house would get sick. And I'm testing out this affect protocol for my gut and and actually my neck as well. If you treat, there's kind of two of the largest kind of blood vessels in your body. So if you'd like to irradiate blood and see impacts from that, it's one of the key areas for this kind of remote photobiomodulation research. So treating one area and then seeing the impact elsewhere. And immune health is just goes through the roof. You just I stopped getting sick when the kids got sick.
I'm gonna take that. I'm gonna get that when it comes out.
Oh, okay. Not to be that guy, Forrest. I'm sure you get this question a lot of times, and I may or may not have clipped this section so I could edit it out because I asked Seamus this like jokingly while you stepped away for a second. I was like, "What about sexual health?" I was like, "Have you used this red light photobiomodulation on your junk?" Because I'm sure everybody's asked you this, and you get it all the time. And obviously, it's a blood flow issue when it comes to ED as well. So, like again, if you're talking about all these things, that are going to have downstream effects with like blood flow. Are people coming to you saying like, "Hey, like inadvertently, this fixed my ED," like for older people? Have you ever? I mean, how much of that? Yeah, okay.
yeah. So two things. One is so I do get this. I get this a lot. Like basically I do founders trips with different kind of company founders and some different events and things like this. And not a event goes by, but somebody pulls me aside. It's like, can I put this on my junk? But there's there literally is. There's seven or eight different good. There's some smaller ones as well, but there's 7 or 8 different good sized, good journal research papers on this. And you can't treat your testes as long as you would the rest of your body, but you do see things like uptick in testosterone if you are treating your testes, and then free testosterone. There was the small, like not massive uptick in testosterone, but free testosterone you see an uptick, and also in sexual health. And so ED and just general kind of sexual. There's a blanket term for this that's eluding me right now, but I can send you through the papers on that as well. It's substantial.
Yeah. Because the product that we were using historically was a Gainswave, which is like a ultrasound acoustic wave therapy for a shockwave. Yeah. So again, they're always, asking
that
about those things. And it's like, hey, you can use this for everything versus just like one thing specifically.
Yeah, actually, one of the things we've done some webinars with an extracorporeal shockwave therapy company that makes a really cool product that a lot of our kind of healthcare professionals that are resellers for our product use. I think they like our model a little bit better, maybe, but they're reselling they're using our devices, which are kind of home use, commercial use price. Versus kind of having to go buy a $100,000 device that sits in clinic. But one of the nice things about that is that there's a number of different things like extracorporeal shockwave therapy, like cupping, so acupuncture. But I would say from a general toolkit standpoint, we have a huge impact on the proliferation of stem cells. So if you are doing stem cell treatments, you 100% want to add a laser piece on top of that. And you see really good outcomes from that. And then things like the blood therapy, and I'm blanking on the acronym right now, but my goodness, there's you extract the blood, you spin it, and then re-inject. Yes, from PRP. Platelet-rich plasma is also intra-articular platelet-rich plasma plus laser has a wildly synergistic kind of use case, and so the outcomes are really positively benefited for that as well.
Have you guys done tests with like peptides like BPC 157 in addition to the red light therapy? I know like now it's kind of
I love it. I think there's a lot that's happening around peptides, and I think there's going to be even more that happens in this in the near term. From a research standpoint, we haven't done a lot of testing with those, but they what we've seen in the past, and PRP is a great example, is when you have things that have a known kind of signaling pathway that they operate through, and we can map that and say that's not the same signaling pathway, which is not for the peptides, then the outcomes tend to be synergistic. And so we haven't tested it yet, but I would if I had anyone to bet with me on this, I would bet them that this is going to have a synergistic outcome as well.
Oh, okay. So we can put it on. What's the Polymarket? Put it on Polymarket as like the over under of like how much synergy would it have?
Yes.
Yeah. I could only imagine like. So I mean, obviously, it seems logical. You were in things that dealt with like light, right? Like a company did that prior to this, but like, how did this turn into like the passion project that you wanted to delve into as the next business venture? Like how did that all come to fruition?
Really just from defining the mission. Like we sat down and my business partner, Tom, and I are extremely different people, just down to like every level that you could be different on. He's vegan. I kind of lean towards almost kind of carnist, as it were. He's an English guy. I'm American. That like pretty much anything you can make decisions on in life, we go down different paths, and we approach kind of the discussions on mission very seriously and from completely different approaches and perspectives. And because of that, we built out this mission of improving people's quality of life in a measurable way, because we want to hold ourselves, if we said, the largest number of people we can in the most measurable way, and that's two things we can actually measure. So how many people we're getting the devices on? Okay, so far 45,000. How is this moving the needle for them? Well, one way that we're measuring this right now is we take surveys and we track a reasonable percentage or a representative percentage of our users. But I think the the next step of this, as I mentioned, is including sensor tech. And that's, again, our entire kind of technology and product development roadmap is around how do we make this more measurable? Because when it's measurable, we're going to see people, even if they're like pain was a tough one to start with. So pain measurements is kind of a visual assessment score. And it's like frowny face to smiley face. Like it's so subjective and like,
like giving birth, they have that. They're like, it's like, hey, you're all birthing a child, but some people are at a 2, some people are at a 10, some people don't need an epidural, others do. It's just completely different experience, even though it's the exact same process.
Yes. And it's nice to have data. So even subjective data is better than nothing. But what we really want is we want to be able to say, we've got objective data showing how we're improving these different health markers for people that are going to be a proxy for us for their quality of life. And so there's a number of different ways to do this, but we're going to be introducing broadband near-infrared spectroscopy sensors. To kind of give a little bit of context for that, one of the things that we've seen, a real success story with, and I think they've done a great job. I love the product as well, is taking plethysmography, which is kind of a 1960s technology, and then putting good data capture around it, and then putting good behavioral modification software around it. So, like, let's make the 3 things. Like, so we've done something like a strain recovery and whatever the other one is. So you give people these derivative kind of buckets where you can say, hey, here's how you can take this data from this very simple kind of, again, old technology, and let's make it useful so we can change behavior. What we're trying to do is take the next generation of these type of technologies from a sensor standpoint, which is upgrading old emitters with lasers and upgrading old sensors with things like, instead of a photodiode, which is somewhat sensitive, things like single photon avalanche diodes, and giving it 10,000 to 100,000 times more sensitivity. And so when you do that, instead of just measuring things like oxygenated and deoxygenated hemoglobin, like heart rate variability, you can start measuring things like functionality of cytochrome C oxidase, which is an enzyme in your mitochondrial phospholipid bilayer that we can measure the functionality of someone's kind of energy generation or metabolic function, for lack of a better term. And so you lay that. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, sorry. No, this is like, I love this because like this is where that kind of the wearable technology is starting to finally become more nudging of the behavior like you're talking about. Because like Whoop has been great. Love the Whoop habit. I love the Move Plus, by the way. But like, for example, Marcos and I work primarily as health coaches in, maybe like CGMs, for example. But now they're talking about like CGMs and these different use cases of like, now they're understanding your insulin, your cortisol in real time, or these inflammatory markers like you're talking about in mitochondria, where it's like, oh, we could start seeing from a consumer wearing device. And I think there's one that's out right now, Marcos. I don't know if you've seen this, Forrest, but like it's on someone's quad, like their marketing is like on someone's quad, and they can see how well you're working in your like workout or something like that. And I've seen it in some like
Nox.
Yeah.
It's what?
Nox. Yeah.
Nox is our friend Evan's company. They've been working on this muscle oxygenation and serum nitric oxide in the form of, I think, of S-nitrous ethyl. Really awesome guy. Love him. He's we met just kind of nerding out on kind of optical sensing and what it could do for people. But it's exactly where the space is going. There's just so much awesome stuff happening here that we feel like we're kind of in the middle of contributing to something that's going to be a huge shift in how humanity approaches this type of problem longer term. And again, what kind of the old Peter Drucker thing from a management style is what gets measured gets done, and like paraphrasing, but like the same thing in training, right? If whatever you measure towards is what you tend to kind of train towards. And I think, one of the things that, again, we're with the cytochrome C oxidase measurements and being able to map that against things like oxygen usage patterns in the brain. And you have redundant kind of energy systems and metabolic systems in your brain that you don't necessarily have in the rest of your body. So kind of astrocytes and how, so that's a bit of a dive to go into, but what's happening, what we're doing with these sensors is for the brain is trying to understand and map metabolic kind of a spectrum of metabolic function to impairment in the brain in a kind of 3D way. And so when you do that, what you find is, and a lot of this is happening on a lab level, we're really just kind of condensing it and trying to bring it in with a more reasonable kind of home use level. But what you notice with this is different pathologies like depression, anxiety, addiction, fibromyalgia. Like there's a number of different things that you can like you have identifying factors from a map of your metabolic look at your brain, and when you can map it, you can actually intervene with it in a way where you can track what that intervention does more effectively. So, what was the before, during, short term, middle term, long term, and how do we make that map? How do we make that roadmap from impairment to health, faster and easier with transcranial treatment as well? So, yeah, it's a super exciting kind of space to be in. I love this though. You guys are getting in with me on the.
I love this. It's like it's funny because like right now I'm going deep dive into something like this. So for Synergistic, and this is something we're working with a company called Longevity AI. You'd love them, but we're going deep into basically understanding all these health markers about you and where it puts you, right? But we need tons of data from your VO2 max to your DEXA. But the problem with that is you have to go into a clinic and you have to do those things, right? Yeah. And I mean, I love it. Like that's what we do. We run diagnostics. We have to look at your labs. We got to look at your brain performance, all these things. Love that. But that's one day. Yeah. What does that look like when you now have all that data, but then you have wearables, and the wearables from one diagnostic day and the wearables are now informing you about your health in real time. So if you have a risk parameter around dementia, and now they're using artificial intelligence and these wearables, and your day of at the center, if you have dementia, for example, I'm just making a random nudge here, but you have these wearables and you have an app saying, hey, you're not getting your steps today. Your risk for dementia kind of goes up that day because it's like, oh, you're not getting your steps. So now it changes your behavior, kind of like the Whoop, where it says like, hey, you're not getting enough sleep. Go get some sleep, or do something about that sleep. And I think what you're doing there is just having a wearable, consistent, and now you're talking about mitochondrial function and brain health here, which is super important. Like I would love, like I'm learning out because I would love that.
Yeah, it's going to be out next year, so it's it's a long path to get there. But I think one of the things that you noted there is I think a really big point that we've seen as well, which is a snapshot is better than nothing. But if you have a signal versus a snapshot, then you understand so much more deeply what's happening and what's impacting this. And so I think Whoop's another great example for this. What you're getting out of a Whoop is really not, it's very strong signals, so heart rate variability, but it's not very closely tied to any kind of outcome. And so you have to have really powerful and large longitudinal data sets with like ongoing signals and being able to parse those relative to age, sex, like a number of different things,
weather,
environment.
Things,
And so when you can start taking that and expanding it out from the signals that you are able to pull, and so heart rate signals are extremely strong signals in the body, and then kind of deriving heart rate variability from that is not difficult math, and so taking that and mapping it back into something where it changes behavior gives us the roadmap for what about when we have more powerful hardware to be able to support this in a more meaningful way. And I think it's in the mail, like it's coming. And again, not that our flavor of this is going to be 100% the only one ever coming. That there's a lot of things coming down the pipeline that are really going to move the needle from an adoption standpoint, and the ability to start building those in to more effective devices that are useful at a home level. And then when you have those at a home level, at a kind of consumer level device, there's the longitudinal data set that's available to it gives it an entirely different kind of vector of strength behind the research for it. And it just allows you to interpret more out of it. So yeah, more coming and then data to support more behind that. And so it's just going to continue kind of an upward spiral, I think, for from this development cycle. But I have been called an aggressive optimist. So
it makes me wonder, like, is there, for you guys specifically, are there partnerships with already existing, like you said, kind of signal-based technologies like Whoop that then allows you to be like, hey, obviously Whoop has like the ability to identify activities that you're doing. Like, okay, it's like we think that you were training, but like, what if you were like, hey, this is you in a recovery session? Like, have you guys looked to tie into other existing platforms already, or is it like you're just going after it on your own with your own app and device?
So I think we're gonna like we don't want to go make PPG devices, but they do add a piece of the picture, and so we're releasing our app this year. We'll have tie-ins for like everything we can, and so that's what we're going to try to do is add another piece of the picture to that to give you a more kind of robust view of the different health pieces that we can build a larger picture out of. And again, there's other companies that are doing kind of data overlays on top of that. So it may be that we kind of bring in this piece and somebody else brings in this piece, and then the data overlay might not be theirs, might not be Whoop's or ours. It might be a third party's. But like again, there's a number of different ways that this kind of hybridizes long term, I think. And we just like the idea of contributing to it because it really does give people a path both to a better outcome, but also just to kind of maintaining. Why should I keep doing this? For photobiomodulation, part of what we see is that it is a delayed gratification type of thing in many cases, and so there's nothing else that's really going to help you reduce, for example, your inflammation in your knee and regrow cartilage in your knee. You can't. There's no pharmaceutical in the world. There's no surgery in the world. There's no training in the world that can do that. If you combine training with photobiomodulation, you can, but if you can't show someone kind of that path in a meaningful and easy to digest way, then their rate of kind of dropping a program, even when they're seeing progress, just because it's kind of stepped or phased or kind of longer term progress from a regrowth standpoint. The soft tissue impacts, the pain impacts we have are relatively quick, and the inflammation impacts are very quick. The soft tissue remodeling impacts take time, and it's one of those things where you're like, I know how it works. But like I as soon as my knee stops hurting, I'm kind of like, okay, I'm back into training and I'm not going to use this quite as much. And it's completely wrong. But it's just one of those things where if you have it in front of someone, the data of like, this is what it's doing, then they can stay and maintain those programs longer.
Yeah, well, it's just like a physical therapist. Like a lot of people are like, oh, I could just do my PT at home, and then they never do it because they don't have the accountability of doing it. I mean, if there was a way to just like, I mean, I think that's kind of the genius behind like like mattress toppers, right? Like, you're going in your bed, once it's installed, it's gonna activate for you and it's gonna do all that stuff. So it's kind of like, if you can never figure out that like ability of not having to like it's like brushing your teeth. Like the people are trying to design toothbrushes that you literally just put a retainer in your mouth that brushes them all for you. Yeah. So like if you can simplify the process of just getting something on, it can then lead to more adoption, keeping it as part of your lifeblood. And I know Seamus, you have your Normatec boot, right? Like how often do you use those?
I use those almost every night. I do the Normatec boots or the hips, just depending. I love the hips, just because the compression, like my legs, I'll do like 3 days of running force, but my hips more so than my legs, if that makes sense, have a problem. So like my hips, low back, I'll be using that one. I'll just be watching TV. I'm like, and I'm using that like at least 3 times a week. So I think you're right, Marcos. I think it's ease of adoption, ease of adoption and making it part. For me, I made it part of my process. I just watch TV or like read a book or something. You know what I'm saying? Like trying to put 2 and 2 together or something.
You've nailed it. Just do the habit stacking. This is the one thing that we found that like everybody stops if you don't habit stack, including me. And like the ones that I've habit stacked in. So I mentioned earlier there's a Japanese lab we work with that's developed a protocol called the proximal priority therapy, and it's the neck and lower abdomen, and it's amazing. But the only reason that I found myself kind of doing it every day is because I drink my coffee and do my emails in the morning, and I do it with that. And like as soon as you start programming it in with that habit stack, boom, like it's just now part of your day. And so we try to kind of push that as much as we can with our users, particularly our older users. But the one thing I would say about that's a funny one is they also, you hear people like, oh yeah, let me stack that with my meditation. You're like, how many times have you meditated in the past week? Like, none. You're like, okay, put it in with your Netflix. Like do it with something that's pragmatic, not aspirational.
Well, what's funny is I did the Kineon. I was doing it like when I drove because I was like, oh my knee. All right, I'll just move it up and down when I'm driving. So it's been helpful.
That's awesome, and I really appreciate the note on that. That's what we're here for. It's we're mission driven, and it's that's what keeps our team going is just hearing that it's actually helping people, because it's we're trying to build it and grow it and get more education out there. And it's been a any kind of new technology, there's always going to be some level of kind of reasonable skepticism. But I think one of the things that we found around this is we went to, so there's a big kind of photonics, laser and light and whatever conference from an academic standpoint called Photonics West. And we went with our CTO, who's an atomic physicist, PhD, and our head of research is a photonics and a photonics PhD program. Really smart guys, on the academic track. And we go listen to like basically everybody in the photobiomodulation talks, talk about their research. And then they have these little forums afterwards where they're like, so why are we not seeing it more broadly adopted? And it's like, well, there's 6,500 or 7,000 different kind of research trials and papers and meta-analyses and all of this. And it's all relatively conclusive. There's a really positive impact out of this. And but being an academic conference, we had a really good laugh about this. What they came to was, we need more research. And it's like, well, the 7,000 papers wasn't enough. Like, we're going to have to just keep doing this like ad nauseum. Like, this is like, I don't think that's the
same
solution.
thing in our field, because like we talk about nutrition, right? And it always ends with, but more research will be needed. It's like, well, like what's like, we kind of like, I feel like people say that to just protect themselves and like go like, oh, but if it doesn't work, it's like, but you guys are, and this is where I feel like the science and the sales has to kind of meet, because at the end of the day, it's like, what is the market asking for? And what does the market need? What does work? And how can you apply it at scale? And it seems like you guys have done this. I mean, I've been seeing red light therapy for quite some time. Like, I do like infrared red light therapy with the sauna. But I know that that's not for the joint. That's probably more for like the skin or something like that. But like, I feel like what else do we need? Like, you're absolutely right. Do we need more studies? Like, for what specificity? I don't know. Like, but I think these things, we are light creatures. Like, we are not just chemical creatures. We're also light creatures. Like, we need it.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think you guys nailed it earlier, though. I think what you said is in line with the assumptions that we've made, which is we have to make it simpler, we have to make it cheaper, and we have to make it, along with being functional, which we are, we have to reduce the friction points for adoption. And so, can you make it easy to travel with? Yes, no problem. We got it cleared for the FCC, so you can carry it on an airplane, and nobody's going to pull out a rubber glove or anything like this.
I'll bring it to you this weekend, Marcos. I'll bring it to you this weekend.
Yeah, bring it to me tomorrow. Yeah, I need some for my knee. I'll be. Again, I know you spoke the praises of it early on, but again, like, I'm a harder sale than Seamus at times. And again, it's just normal. It's like both of our instincts. Granted, I have 2 young kids that you see in the background here. So, I mean, my HSA funds typically don't get spent on me. It's very seldom. It's to like pay for visits of stuff. So again, like, well, that's a great option and a great thing. I'm like, man, like, again, that's $400 that I don't know if I need to spend it on some sniffles. Like, they both have influenza A right now. So again, we had to go so we both had to go to the doctor today, and then it was a little bit of a blood work. So I'm like, oh great, well now how much is coming out of my HSA fund just as a result of that, right? So I'm a harder sell because I have to be, because where I'm at in life. But I again, like you just said, it's like I don't need more literature. 6,000 papers on it is probably enough. Just like with blood flow restriction training, and immediately in my head's like, again, I did a seminar with it. I bought one that was a particular unit. They've actually upgraded it. I bought it like 2019, so it's like 6 years now where I've had this Gen 1 model of this thing. And again, I'm like, man, like, even with that, like, the adoption of just like putting on these things to get like a better pump with the workout, sometimes it's like hard to want to do or incorporate that with the other stacking of just like normal fitness behavior. And I love that feeling, right? So again, like Seamus just said, it's like, hey, like, stacking, or like you said, it's like stacking something that is actually actionable, right? And not whatever you said. What was it? Not pragmatic, or not, or it's actually pragmatic and not aspirational. I love that. I love how you said that. That was like beautiful, because I'm looking at that as like, okay, like, where would I find utilization of thing? I'm like, dude, there's literally an hour every night that I could find 15 minutes just to like sit there and have this on a knee or this joint. Okay, well, now do I need multiple units to try to do that, or am I going to go through the trouble of trying to hit these different problem areas? You know what I mean? And like, you guys, you're obviously looking at that from a consumer standpoint of like, okay, well, is it bigger, or is it just that you have to come to terms with like you have to use 2 of them, right? And that's like I appreciate you talking about how you're like trying to bring down or focus on bringing down costs so that there's less time that you have to try to utilize for that, because next thing you know, you're spending an hour on a recovery routine for the 3 problem areas in your body.
That's exactly it. But I do think just one quick note, and we have some friends with really cool BFR companies as well. BFR has turned out to be essentially the poor man's PRP. So you can do it every day. You can do it at home, and you aggregate the exact type of tissue that we want in the area. So if you can do that at the same time, you see it's not as aggressive as PRP, but you see a massive synergistic lift, particularly so if you have knee issues or anything knee, ankle, joint based, and you can use BFR combined with the laser therapy, like night and day.
What's the protocol for that? Because I actually have a patient that I met with yesterday, or no, 2 days ago. It was on Tuesday. Very almost contemplating total knee replacement type of thing.
Yeah.
So I had said, hey, we can work through range of motion and do just even blood flow restricted leg extensions. And here's the 30-15-15-15 protocol, like the normal BFR protocol that most people do, right? And I'm just looking at it from this guy's almost 70, right? He still has he wants that health span, not just lifespan, right? And so now you're mentioning that protocol. What does that protocol actually look like for BFR in conjunction? Is it just the sitting and you go slightly higher LOP? Lymph occlusion pressure. Okay.
Yeah. And you keep it at a 90-degree angle. And basically one of the only things that we see as kind of a blocker for outcomes for us that we've kind of flagged from our interactions with users. And again, kind of those early days of tracking what's not, why is this not working for you? Because it should, is 95% of the people that were doing treatments on knees and not getting the outcomes they wanted had their knee at 180 degree. Versus 90 degree. When it's at 90 degree, there's two little channels kind of on either side and below your patella that go straight into your synovial fluid, and that really open that up for us to be able to reduce the inflammation there. And so if you can apply the BFR, 15 minutes with the knee bent at 90 degrees and the laser, and if they have the BFR at home especially, then it's lights out. Like they really go through kind of that recovery curve extremely quickly.
Who are your friends in the BFR space? I'm wondering which brand it is.
So we've got some the Suji guys and the Smart Tools guys, and they approach different. So the Smart Tools guys do kind of more the kind of B2B, and the Suji guys do more the D2C.
Okay. Yeah. I went to the Smart Tools guys conference and got certified in that level 1 back in 2019. So,
nice.
But they didn't have they had more of the clinical set at the time. Now they have a more at home thing. But I mean, one of their competitors is Saga Fitness, which again, I found that it's a little bit cheaper. I don't know if necessarily the actual the cup itself, the enclosure is maybe quite the same. I haven't seen their newest unit, their number 4. But at the end of the day, again, I'm honestly I love that you mentioned that, because I'm my mom had a knee replacement. This guy's questioning that, and for me as health coach and someone that's looking to drive outcomes that people would likely do, if you're in enough pain, it's hey, just try this out and see if your normal day-to-day functioning feels better. And you've kind of mentioned this whole time is again, that's simple enough. That's 15 minutes twice a day, and not only that, but something about I think that the neurological side of things, getting that kind of pump from BFR plus the other thing where it has that repair, I can see that really being a profound effect with people and wanting to continue to do that daily.
We've seen it really kind of change people's trajectory from especially with older folks with like you mentioned, the recovery from surgeries and things like this, getting back in and getting into movement faster. But the main thing, one of the things that's been a kind of an intuitive takeaway from us on that is giving them this to be able to do at home also means that if they go walk and it triggers, they don't feel kind of they feel like they can deal with it. They're empowered to kind of manage these things themselves. And it's been really kind of, we get a lot of it flared up, but it went right back down. And you're yes, keep going. Keep going back into the movement. And that's one of the things where we work with our healthcare professionals on this of think of it as a tool to keep them on the program, because they may go home and do you have them on little stair step downs or something like this, and then they slip a little bit, and then their knee blows up again, and they're
programming.
Yeah, something like this. But a lot of it, they it'll trigger something for them, and they'll just stop. They'll be that's not right. That guy told me the wrong thing to do, or whatever. And if you give them a tool to be able to kind of get that inflammation back down quickly, they'll pop right back into it. And our healthcare professionals are really pushing people on this right now of you have a tool to keep your inflammation down, push yourself through this. You can actually, like, even if it's not the most comfortable thing, you're going to be able to manage it because you have something to reduce pain and inflammation. And so that's one of the things where, again, for me, like the you know, what motivates me every morning is we have a group in our Slack channel where, like, we see, like, they post a bunch of the different kind of testimonials back in from people, and it's the old folks. For me, like, it's nice to see, like, you know, oh, there's an NFL guy that we're working with on this or whatever on that. But like, what really gets me is, like, my wife can walk across the grocery store again. Like, she couldn't walk for like 3 years. She's able to do this now. This is crazy. She can walk up the stairs, and like, those are the ones that, like, I know for me, like, it's just the big takeaway is like, that's the impact we're trying to make, you know?
No, it's so funny you say that, Forrest, because for the longest time I got into this career, was a strength and conditioning coach for collegiate athletes. I was wrestling, and it's like, oh, I wanted to just work with athletes. And it's so funny because it's like, these guys are already like killing it. They don't really need a strength and conditioning coach. Like, they, you know, like they're going to do, these guys are monsters. But when I was, you know, personal training and coaching people, like, what really did jazz me up truly was folks that, like, I had this like 72-year-old who learned how to do a Turkish get up with like a 60-pound like sandbag. And it's like, yo, like, you know, like, how does, like, that to me is much more impactful in my experience than, like, okay, making like a collegiate athlete like do some cleans. Like, they're monsters. This is a story right here. You know, this 72-year-old that I got to work with doing this Turkish get up, they're not in pain. They've lost a lot of weight. Like, I was working with them in the nutrition. I'm like, that to me feels so much more impactful, exactly with like what you're talking about.
Well, the impact is this: it's adding years, functional years to their lives, you know. And like how awesome is that we can go do that? And I again, like, that's one of the things where, like, we get stuck back in the lab, but like, I think what you guys do, you're on the front line, and you get to see these changes, and we're trying to empower that in the best way we can by different product changes and helping to kind of reduce friction points and costs and all this. But like, there's nothing more exciting to me than like the clinical applications of this. They don't let me out in the field too much these days because I get like super excited about it. But like, it's just, there's nothing better than that. Those interactions with humans, you're impacting people's lives in a really powerful way.
Seamus, it made me think about this. Like, there's definitely downtime in our patient's day where we could literally strap a unit on anybody in our office for that they could maybe potentially see benefits of this. Like, as
That's like just in Beverly Hills.
I can see it now because you're like, oh, they're literally sitting here doing this cognitive test. Hey, is your hip, ankle, knee, is there something bothering you in those areas? You put this on and then see, like, again, perceptively, like, how they feel afterwards. I feel like, I don't know, I might just be the one to just buy the unit and then start throwing it on my patients a little bit throughout the day, especially I feel like the most common joint issues, again, are that knee and shoulder. So likely I can find one spot where I can see, again, like, hey, like, how do you feel today? Like, oh, you know what, come to think of it, like, that stuff, that, you know, it was helpful.
We'll send you one. Just let me know. Send me your details. We'll get you one out there. One of the things that we're finding is that, like, if you like it and you test it on there and they like it, then we have this program where we basically just kind of get you out, like, at a cost plus version 5 to put in your clinic, and then just let people, like, you know, kind of play with it and use it while they're in there. And then one of the things that people are also doing that have been really successful, it's got like 100% hit rate from but basically you say, hey, $50 a week, take it home. And you minimum 2 weeks, because otherwise you're not going to see real results from it. People, like, basically it's like a 98% hit rate so far. Anybody who takes it home is like I'll apply that $100 to buying it, and then you've sold another one, and, you know, they're now enabled at home to reduce the inflammation, stay on your program longer, and they just, you know, they're bought in for it. It gives them a tool to kind of feel empowered.
Yeah, it makes me think of my buddy Adam has a physical therapy clinic, so he's more so dealing with people in that realm than myself, but he's very East meets West and likes using different things. Like, are you familiar with the like the new fit or the newbie type unit where it uses like direct current for like maps?
Yes.
You know, you can find like kind of
It's my nervous system.
Yeah. So he's using stuff like that in conjunction with, like, an acupuncture and like e-stim, and then he has this other one called a windback unit where it, like, again, kind of sends things through. And but again, just so that, again, like, it's like, hey, he's like, I'm gonna throw everything at this person to get them back to play, quote, to play. And it's literally all those older people that we're just like, hey, like, to give them quality of life is the approach. But again, like, he's actually looking for things like, how can I get people to do stuff at home? They're less likely to do the actual physical therapy exercises probably, but a particular unit, I mean, like you just said, it's like, hey, here you go, take the unit home, $50 a week, you're renting it to own, you know, if not, you bring it back, you know, after 2 weeks, and then you move it on to the next person. Like, that is actually a very brilliant way of probably doing a sales or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. We're just kicking it off now. We've had just good success. We've been really, I think, blessed to have so many people kind of reaching out to us that are just so good at what they do and healing people. And that's one of the things they suggested for us. And so we're just following their kind of direction there. Like, I think we've got 6 guys on our kind of clinical advisory board. And like all of them, one of them tried it, and they were like, "Oh, we'll all try this." And like they're like, nobody's giving them back. Just like keep shipping us more devices. These are going out like crazy. So
What info would I need to give him in order to try to do something along that line for his practice? Out of curiosity.
Yeah, just connect with me, and actually it'll be Bex that Seamus has interacted with, and she'll follow up and get your device out, get him a device out, and get everybody moving.
Hell yeah! Well, we love it because I mean, again, we're looking for outcomes. Just like with your mission statement, honestly, is kind of what this has turned into. Like myself and Seamus, because it's like while we do miss our competitive days, ultimately being able to like kind of live that through other people and getting them to have those moments where they come to us and say, so and so gave me this compliment, or oh my god, you'll never believe what I am finally able to do again. Like to us, that is what we're in search of, because those are kind of our moments that kind of like make us, takes us aback a little bit, and we feel positive that we're like being able to influence things. And as more so like health and nutrition coaches, a lot of the ways, like again, there's only so getting people to get accountable with nutrition is a very difficult thing. Like it's probably like I tell Seamus this all the time. We talk about in the podcast all the time. Why are we doing this job where it's probably like, again, one of the most difficult things where we're more science minded and like you're geeking out about all these things on the back end in the lab? Seamus and I would like probably kill to be in that position. Like it was kind of.
We'd love to like look over like your shoulder, like a fly on your shoulder for a day. Yeah.
Anytime, really. Like it's I think somehow, like, because I'm also kind of the same about what you guys are doing, and I feel like you got to find a balance for it where you're in contact and you can see how this is helping people directly, which you guys get to see a lot of, and we try to pull back in through like our communications with our users, but it is kind of fun to be on the science side of things, and seeing the next generation of lasers that are coming out. So they got the new vertical cavity surface emission lasers. Like, all right, they're going to shrink them down. Can we fit extra ones in here? Is it going to impact things from a distribution level in a positive way? How can we kind of keep all of this moving forward in a way that's going to make it meaningfully better, like for the next generation of product?
Well, I love what you guys have. I mean, at the end of the day, like you guys have a product and a behavior. It's not just a product, or it's not like nutrition coaching where it's just a behavior, right? It's two. And you bridge both worlds. And it's crazy because you can hit what you're talking about from the performance athlete, the NFL guy, to all the way to the grandma or the grandpa that's struggling with that. And I think that right there is like the end of one. Like you've really like hit such the category, and it does so many things. So the application is just is a whirlwind. But I do want to make sure I'm respectful of the time. Forrest, we're over an hour here, but I do want to we're going to get some of this info from you. But there are some things in the future. You've got the gut health, the brain health, the vagus nerve. You also have that endometriosis things. These things are coming out. You got an app, all these things. But where can people find more about Kineon U and just anything else you might be excited about? Because I feel like an hour on photobiomodulation, red light therapy, lasers is not enough. Marcos and I can go deep dive more, but I want to be respectful of your time.
Mm-hmm. No worries. I'd love to jump in with you guys. But yeah, you can find us on Kineon, Kineon.io. That's our website. We have a pretty cool educational blog there, so that we spend a lot of time trying to kind of wrap up and put a bow on a lot of the really useful and meaningful research in the space. We're also going to be doing for a week, as this podcast launches, $100 off for your listeners. So anybody who wants to get in for that, it'll be $50 ongoing after that, but $100 off for this week if you can get it in, and that includes free shipping as well, I believe. So come check us out. We'll have the link for you guys available for that. And if you want to check us out on social and see some of the more kind of athlete and kind of professional, NFL, CrossFitters, NBA, these type of guys, that's on Kineon_Labs is our handle for Instagram. We have a Facebook group. If you want to ask, we have, I think, about 6,000 people in there now who are users, and then potential users, and then experts and clinicians. And there's a lot of people answering and asking questions in meaningful ways and sharing their experience with the devices, which has just been great for people to find out, like, hey, can I use it for this, or can I use it for that? Our head of research, who's a photonics academic, has been in there kind of helping people to find the right information. So that's a few ways you can connect with us. And again, hopefully people are going to take advantage of the $100 off, because that's a pretty solid deal for it. And again, with the free shipping, we don't run it too much from a discount these days. And it'd be great to see a lot of your subscribers take advantage of it, because again, that's completely in line with our mission. We're trying to get in more hands and on more joints and healing more people.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Whoa, my kids are going crazy in the background. See, we can wrap this up at the perfect time. No, we appreciate that for so much, and thank you. And we'll really make sure everybody gets like that information. And I think that additional like ongoing support from like that Facebook group can be really helpful too. So we'll make sure to find that and have that linked up onto the show notes as well. And man, I know Seamus said it like best. Like we would love to pick your brain more. But I'm super grateful for your time today. The hour is, I'm blown away by like just the depth of information you're able to provide and like blow me away with. And I can't wait to try a couple things experimentally with my parents and see if I can't get some additional outcomes for them as a result of like things I've thought about, but you can just kind of like, you button it up and you put the bow on it. It's like, hey, like literally just, and again, I actually would have thought about doing that at 180 degrees with the knee and not having it at 90 degrees. So thank you for clarifying that in order to help opening that up. So appreciate you with that.
And please do keep me posted on how that goes. I'd love to know. Again, if there's anything where we're not kind of achieving the outcomes that we're targeting with it, it's better for us to know, and it helps us improve the products longer term. If we are, it's nice to know, but if we're not, then we really need to know. So positive and critical feedback are great.
I got two people I want to try to do a little case study with. So again, I mean, both of them dealing with some knee stuff. I have a knee thing too, so technically it would be 3, but just additional things that kind of help with like pain alleviation, even if it is like, again, N of 3 of like just doing, hey, we're going to run this protocol again, 15 minutes, twice a day, 3 times a week, or whatever that ends up looking like. I've been wanting to kind of do some like in the fields type research with smaller groups of people. Granted, like that's what nutrition coaching is half the time. It's like, hey, anecdotally, I've noticed, with this, population I've worked with, this approach is my approach, and that's what I like to do with them. Right? These are the things I know if I can get them to understand, they will do. But same thing here is like, hey, like this is something a little bit different because it's out of the confines of just like food and education with food. So yeah. And actually one last question, Seamus, and then we can wrap it up officially. In terms of just like overall systemic inflammation and diet, so you and your partner have very different approaches with that.
Yes.
Both of which though are touted as diets that are lowering inflammation, because it's like you said, you're kind of carnist or a carnivore based person, right? So probably a lot of meats, very little fruits and vegetables, whereas he's very much so fruit and vegetable laden, right?
Perfect.
For both of you using these things like lower inflammatory diets, you're not eating a very typical Western diet as a result, right? So both, would you guys say that has some sort of other influence on like the effectiveness of this? Does it help speed things up a little bit in terms of like the outcomes for people?
So I think he and I would disagree about this because
okay,
obviously we would sit around and challenge about this. And again, that's our kind of dynamic for. And I think it's carried over to the company is we challenge about everything. Like we really want to understand kind of when you can synthesize opposing opinions or what appear to be opposing opinions and kind of create something that's that encompasses both. Then the idea, and in many cases has worked very well for us, is that you can create something that's more all-encompassing and more comprehensive as an outcome. But to do that, you have to have thick skin, and you have to be okay with kind of people poking about it. But I would say in this case that the limited carbs and kind of limited sugars and processed food that we don't really have anything in the house. We do kind of do dairy in the form of kind of unsweetened yogurt. We do some veggies, but not a lot, and we do a reasonable amount of fruit. With kind of sweetness being kind of like the kids like have dates and stuff like this for desserts and things like this. But and also it doesn't spike your glucose, and there's a number of kind of like kind of positive impacts for that relative to other sweet things. But I would say we probably see slightly better systemic inflammation kind of numbers than most people would, and that for example, the gut device may work a little bit faster for us because of that. With the one of the things that we've seen with kind of standard American diet is that there's a lot more people than you think out there with leaky gut. And the systemic impacts from inflammation for that are, they're reported, but people I think it's way underreported, and it's way it's doing a lot more from an autoimmune and immune standpoint than people really realize. And that's something that we do treat with our gut device, but if you start at a reasonable level with it, then it's easier to maintain at a lower, more reasonable level. If if you're eating McDonald's and stuff all the time, that leaky gut piece is it's something to manage.
I love this conversation, because now we can get you and your partner to actually test it, because you're going to have those no exactly, because you're going to have those oximeters, those things that start reading out the mitochondria and be like, okay, let's really see, and then. This is going down a deep rabbit hole, but certain genetic frameworks and certain genetics with those readers, and seeing how does red light compare, or how does this diet compare, and we can get really finally you can finally go for you as an individual, this is what's going to work for you.
Yeah.
I think the combination of that and then gene expression data. So our friend Evan from Knox just kind of was talking to us about this the other day. There's more data captured and generated right now around kind of gene expression data than there is generated by Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google. All of that is orders of magnitude smaller from a data generation standpoint than what we're seeing around gene expression. And there's a bunch of really good research going on in this space using kind of machine learning and AI approaches for how to parse that, and then understand really on a individual level, how is that gene. So is human genome great, but what does that gene expression look like, and what's impacting that? Because that's really kind of the interface with diet and training and environment that's going to allow us to kind of see this on an individualized basis so clearly. So you've nailed it. I think that's one of the exciting things.
We're getting close to finally getting, and this is an odd way of saying it, but to the truth. We're getting that much closer to it, much faster.
But I think how you guys are thinking about it is perfect. It's going to end up being N of one. There are some trends, but even within the trends, there's still kind of outliers for all of this. And the just genetic kind of genes is one piece, with that gene expression and kind of the signaling pathways that you see from these newer tests that you can get now. It's going to inform us as to what that is for every individual, and that's. That and the sensors and all of this is just so exciting to see what's happening in the world right now. What an awesome time to be alive.
What an awesome time.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. And yeah, again, I just don't want to take any more of your time, but I immediately think of red light. I was going to ask you about insulin resistance and insulin sensitivities with the gut stuff, and I'm sure you guys will have that as part of your blog and as that devices get out there. I'm going to take a stand and say probably is going to improve those things.
We'll probably have to do a part 2 at the end of this year or start of next year when these products have been out and tested. We'll probably have to do that.
I love it. But there is literature on insulin, improving insulin sensitivity, and on fat mobilization. And so just on white adipose tissue, essentially browning. So you're increasing the kind of mitochondrial density and kind of browning white adipose tissue, and they're starting to experiment on this with visceral fat as well, and which is really kind of hard to do that with. You can environmental, we get in the cold, okay, we're going to brown some white adipose tissue around the abdomen, but how do you kind of improve the mitochondrial kind of efficacy of your visceral fat, which is and so what they're seeing with this right now is things like fatty liver disease be improved by treatment with photobiomodulation. We're not really dosed for that one, but our next product, we have some flexibility on how you can modify that from a software standpoint. So definitely let me, anytime you guys want to nerd out on all this, just let me know. I'm happy to to spend as much time as we can to do that.
Nice, awesome. Well, you heard it here first. Well, there will be a part 2 at some point, probably later on, as these newer products is unveiled. And Forrest, again, thank you for taking an hour and a half of your time today to spend it with us, and really enlighten us in a lot of ways, and talk about something that you're obviously very passionate about. And we're excited to hopefully get this in more people's hands, and for us to experiment it with a few different things in our clinic and with our personal people we're working with. And yeah, man, you're obviously your energy is infectious in a very positive way. And again, like
I appreciate it.
I could really do this for 3 hours with you, like Joe Rogan. Like, and I'm sure it would geek out even further about like again these ties and these things that you're excited about, that we're excited about. And I think we're all, like Seamus said, like kind of cracking the human genome in a sense and looking at ways to be able to, again, just make it so that everybody, like, an injury is no longer a death sentence, right? An injury is no longer the thing that defines you and doesn't allow you to get back to playing and doing the things that you enjoy, especially with our aging populations. My parents approaching 70, I want them to have the next 10 years when they're officially retired to be fantastic. And then they're mobile and it's not limited by some sort of pain. So any little thing that I can help give them an upper hand with it is, again, at their house versus having to go somewhere. And I just got to be like, hey, I can check in on an app with them. Like, did you do your shit today? You know what I mean? Like, again, it's super cool to see all that stuff come to fruition.
Oh, that's so exciting. Really appreciate that. Such a kind way to wrap this up, and had a great time with you guys today. Anytime, please let me know. I'm happy to jump in with you. So exciting to see what you're doing as well. And yeah, thank you so much for the time. This was a really exciting discussion.
All right. Awesome, man. Until next time, Macro Perspective peeps, we are out.